At this moment, they were thinking 10,000 complicated thoughts. The straight man's mouth opened and a deep and reliable voice could be heard. What if you haven't left here yet? You should have run away quickly. Although it was a voice that scolded the couple who stayed at home, it didn't seem like it would hurt them immediately. That is. I need to pack my bags, and I also need the travel expenses. The couple, for some reason, was desperately making excuses in front of a man they didn't even know. It seemed the only way to survive. Travel expenses. The man murmured along with Debbie's words, then put his hands in his pockets. Scott subconsciously hid Debbie behind him, wondering if she would pull out her gun. Of course, once Scott died, she would be next, naturally, but he still wanted to protect her, if only for a moment. But what came out of the man's pocket was not a gun, but a bag full of money. He tossed the bag of money nonchalantly to Scott, who, bewildered, caught it with both hands. That should be enough. Go quickly before I change my mind. If not, I don't know what I'll do. The words were clearly a fierce threat, but curiously, they didn't sound like that to the couple. They didn't know who he was, but they thought that, despite his intimidating appearance, he might be surprisingly kind and gentle on the inside. Oh, thank you. The couple walked past the man, without losing sight of him, and left the cabin. Cloud, who had been waiting for them with his eyes closed, added without even looking at them, if possible, you should go to places with few people. Since you've been living in such remote places, you'll know how to handle it. But there's a carriage parked up ahead, so be careful. It was a polite farewell, pretending not to notice until the end. The pair followed Cloud's instructions and descended the mountain, silencing any signs of life. Sure enough, there was a carriage parked on the main road, and they had to avoid it. And a little later, flames were seen rising from the cabin where they had made their home. The man had apparently set it on fire after they left. Scott stood watching in a daze as the foundation of his life, the ones he had worked so hard to build, was reduced to ashes. It seemed unreal. For the past 20 years, this place had been his entire life. You should go quickly. Why do you have that lost look? And then Debbie grabbed him. Yes, let's go. First we have to survive. Isn't life more important than a house? Although his physical strength was no longer the same as before, his carpentry skills were still intact. As long as he lived, he could easily claim his lands. They quickened their pace and soon disappeared into the darkness of the forest. Cloud, who had gone to the couple's cabin, returned to the carriage shortly after. From the direction he was walking, there was a smell of burning smoke, and the intense flames of a burning wooden building rose. I hope you handled it cleanly. Of course. Cloud nodded in response to Capella's question. And Isla grabbed his arm impatiently. What does that mean? Deal with them. What did you do to them? Did you really kill them? No? Half of it was an act to show off to Capella, but the other half was not an act, it was sincere. Because she still didn't know what choice Cloud would make. And he nodded, blinking slowly, as if to assure her that he had done as he was told. Strangely, the moment she saw his clear eyes, all of Isla's doubts about Cloud seemed to disappear in an instant. It was inevitable for the master's plan. You're not trying to seem so weak as to say that you're really fond of them, are you? Capella asked sharply, arms crossed, and Ayla shook her head down, expressionless. Sure, he only looked sad on the outside, but he was overflowing with joy. Because he had been able to save Scott and Debbie, and soon the curse on his body would be lifted, and he would finally be able to return to his biological parents. But the joy that had blossomed in her heart dissipated like a mirage at the sight of Byron. My daughter. Run to the lower village and ask for help. If you wear this necklace, they will mistake you for a princess and take you to their house. The lord of this area is known for his generous spirit and righteousness, so he probably meddles more than necessary. He was waiting for Isla to come from a nearby mountain, and as soon as they met, he said this without even having time to recover from his emotions. Right now? No, that couldn't be right. They hadn't even performed the ritual to lift the curse, so there was no way they would allow him into the Duke's house. Yes, now. Why is that? Byron looked at Isla with a bewildered wink, but she was the one who should have been confused. The curse. Why don't you pick it up? If she walked into the Duke's house like that, her mother, Ophelia, would notice and think it was strange. Why was he suddenly trying to fire her without even lifting the curse? And it seemed like she wasn't the only one nervous about Byron's order. Cloud's face was also clearly puzzled. My lord. When Cloud called out to Byron in an urgent voice, he put his index finger to his lips. Shoo, we'll talk later. I need to talk to my dear daughter first. Is there any reason you can't leave now, daughter? No, it's not that. I feel sad because if I separate from my father like this, I won't be able to see you for a long time. Isla tried to hide her surprise and made up a plausible excuse. Oh. My daughter seems very sad. But even if you miss your father, please be patient a little longer. Soon, we will meet again in the most glorious moment. Indeed, his excuse worked, and Byron smiled and replied, You should go out, daughter. You should go out and get ready, right? Your parents were killed by bandits and your house was burned down. You wouldn't appear so good. He nodded, motioning for her to leave. It was time to see her off and talk to Cloud. Isla had no choice but to nod and leave. Capella approached her, burnt her face and clothes with charcoal and tore them. It also left scratches here and there. While she was outside applying realistic makeup, Cloud was asking Byron in a panicked voice why he didn't lift the curse. My lord, why don't you lift the curse? Well, it's true. While I was taking care of that little girl, I heard some interesting news. My Ophelia can't use magic anymore. Byron chuckled as if he was enjoying himself. In some ways, it felt strange to have a child. They say that due to the strong magical power, it is difficult for a child to be born. He never thought something like this would happen. If there is no fear of being caught, then there is no need to break the chains, right? That girl might change her mind once she breaks free from my brainwashing. Byron rested his chin on his arm, which was resting on the armrest of his chair, and smiled widely. It was a genuinely happy smile, and that made it even more disturbing. Wasn't Laura supposed to take care of that? Yes, it's true. But wouldn't it be better to take out insurance instead of depending only on your niece? At Byron's response, Cloud bit his lip nervously. It was incredible that Ophelia had lost her magic. There is also Candace Epusher, my lord. Don't forget that. He was staying at the Duke's house until recently. Cloud somehow managed to persuade Byron by mentioning Candace. Aside from the threat of Ophelia, the Duke's family had many variables. Ah, you mean that thin, clueless woman. It's not that she's lazy, so do you think she comes here that often? Byron hadn't forgotten either. Since Ophelia came from a land of wizards, there were many wizards around her. Because it started with her best friend, Candace Epusher. But Candace held a fairly high position in the Timor Republic. Even if he managed to find time to visit the Duke's residence this time, it was impossible to know when he would find him again. Furthermore, he mainly investigated the people close to Ophelia, but apart from Candace, there was no wizard good enough to notice the hidden curse. Even Isidore, Ophelia's biological brother, was said to be a wanderer who, unlike his sister, had little innate magical power and spent his days confined to his study. As Byron explained this story, he suddenly frowned, wondering why he was telling all this to his subordinate. If that's what I'm going to do, so be it. Are you dissatisfied? No, my lord. Cloud lowered his head, hiding his feelings. If Byron had already decided to send her back without lifting the curse, there was no way he could help Isla. He tried to erase his guilt by returning her safely to her parents, but it seemed that even that wouldn't turn out the way he wanted.